Nobody's Boy, Chapter 21. Meeting Old Friends. It took us nearly 3 months to do this journey, but when at last we reached the outskirts of Versailles, we found that we had indeed employed our time well. In my letter purse, I now had 128 francs. We were only short of 22 francs to buy Mother Barberin's cow. Mattia was almost as pleased as I, and he was very proud that he had contributed his part to such a sum. His part was great, for I am sure that without him, Capi and I could not have collected anything like the sum of 128 francs. From Versailles to Chavanon, we could easily gain the 22 francs that we were short. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when we arrived at Versailles, and a radiant sun shone in the clear sky, but the nearer we got to the town, the darker became the atmosphere. Between the sky and the earth hung a cloud of smoke. I knew that Alexis' uncle was a miner at Versailles, but I did not know whether he lived in the town itself or outside. I simply knew that he worked in a mine called the Truyère. Upon entering the town, I asked where this mine was situated, and I was directed to the left bank of the river Divonne, in a little dale traversed by a ravine, after which the mine had been named. This dale is a place as unattractive as the town. At the office, they told us where Uncle Gaspard, Alexis' uncle, lived. It was in a winding street which led from the hill to the river, at a little distance from the mine. When we reached the house, a woman who was leaning up against the door talking to 2 or 3 neighbors told me that Gaspard, the miner, would not be back until 6 o'clock. "What do you want of him?" she asked. "I want to see Alexis, his nephew." "Oh, you are Rémi," she said. "Alexis has spoken of you. He's been expecting you. Who is that boy?" She pointed to Mattia. "He is my friend. This woman, Alexis' aunt." I thought she would ask us to go in and rest, for we were very dusty and tired. But she simply repeated that if I would return at 6 o'clock, I could see Alexis, who was then at the mine. I had not the heart to ask for what was not offered. I thanked her and went into the town to find a baker to get something to eat. I was ashamed of this reception, for I felt that Mattia would wonder what it meant. Why should we have tramped so many miles for this? It seemed to me that Mattia would have a poor idea of my friends, and that when I should speak to him of Lise, he would not listen to me with the same interest, and I wanted him very much to like Lise. The cold welcome that the aunt had given us did not encourage me to return to the house. So, at a little before 6 o'clock, Mattia, Capi, and I went to the entrance of the mine to wait for Alexis. We had been told by which gallery the miners would come out, and a little after 6 we began to see in the dark shadows of the gallery some tiny lights which gradually became larger. The miners with lamp in hand were coming up into the day, and because their work finished. They came on slowly with heavy gait, as though they suffered in the knees. I understood how this was later when I myself had gone over the staircases and ladders which led to the last level. Their faces were as black as chimney sweeps, their clothes and hats covered with gold dust. Each man entered the lamplighter's cabin and hung up his lamp on a nail. Although keeping a careful lookout, I did not see Alexis until he had rushed up to me. I should have let him pass without recognizing him. It was hard to recognize in this boy, black from head to toe, the chum who had raced with me down the garden paths in his clean shirt, turned up to the elbows, and his collar thrown open, showing his white skin. "It's Rémi," he cried, turning to a man of about 40 years, who walked near him and who had a kind, frank face like Mr. Aquin. This was not surprising, considering that they were brothers. I knew that this was Uncle Gaspard. "We've been expecting you a long time," he said, smiling. "The road is long from Paris to Versailles," I said, smiling back. "And your legs are short," he retorted, laughing. Capi, happy at seeing Alexis, expressed his joy by tugging at the leg of his trousers with all his might. During this time, I explained to Uncle Gaspard that Mattia was my friend and partner, and that he played the cornet better than anyone. "And there's Monsieur Capi," said Uncle Gaspard. "You'll be rested tomorrow, so you can entertain us, for it's Sunday. Alexis says that dog is cleverer than a schoolmaster and a comedian combined. As much as I felt ill at ease with the aunt, so I felt at ease with Uncle Gaspard. Now, you two boys talk together," he said cheerily. "I'm sure that you have a lot to say to each other. I'm going to have a chat with this young man who plays the cornet so well." Alexis wanted to know about my journey, and I wanted to know about his work. We were so busy questioning each other that neither of us waited for a reply. When we arrived at the house, Uncle Gaspard invited us to supper. Never did an invitation give me such a pleasure, for I had wondered as we walked along if we should have to part at the door, the aunt's welcome not having given us much hope. "Here's Rémi and his friend," said the father, entering the house. We sat down to supper. The meal did not last long, for the aunt, who was a gossiper, was only serving delicatessen that evening. The hard-working miner ate his delicatessen supper without a word of complaint. He was an easy-going man who, above all, liked peace. He never complained. If he had a remark to pass, it was said in a quiet, gentle way. The supper was soon over. Uncle Gaspard told me that I could sleep with Alexis that night, and told Mattia that if he would go with him into the back house, he would make him up a bed there. That evening, the greater part of the night, Alexis and I spent talking. Everything that Alexis told me excited me strangely. I had always wanted to go down in a mine, but when I spoke of it the next day to Uncle Gaspard, he told me that he could not possibly take me down, as only those who worked in the colliery were permitted to enter. "If you want to be a miner," he said, "it will be easy. It's not worse than any other job. It's better than being a singer on the street. You can stay here with Alexis. We'll get a job for Mattia also, but not in playing the cornet." Oh no, I had no intention of staying at Varses. There was something else I had set myself to do. I was about to leave the town without my curiosity being satisfied when circumstances came about in which I learned, in all their horror, the dangers to which the miners are exposed. On the day that I was to leave Varses, a large block of coal fell on Alexis' hand and almost crushed his finger. For several days he was obligated to give the hand complete rest. Uncle Gaspard was in despair, for now he had no one to push his car, and he was afraid that he also would be obligated to stay at home, and he could ill afford to do this. "Why can't I take his place?" I asked, when he returned home after hunting in vain for a boy. "I was afraid the car would be too heavy for you, my boy," he said, "but if you'd be willing to try, you'd help me a mighty lot. It is hard to find a boy for a few days only. And while you are down in the mine, I'll go off with Capi and earn the rest of the money for the cow," said Mattia. The 3 months that we had lived together in the open air had completely changed Mattia. He was no longer the poor, pale boy whom I found leaning up against the church, much less was he the monster whom I had seen in the first time in Garofoli's attic, looking after the shop and from time to time clasping his hands over his poor aching head. Mattia never had a headache now. He was never unhappy, neither was he thin or sad. The beautiful sun and the fresh air had given him health and spirits. On our tramps he was always laughing and in a good humor, seeing the best side of everything, amused at anything, happy at nothing. How lonely I would have been without him. We were so utterly different in character. Perhaps that was why we got on so well together. He had a sweet, sunny disposition, a little careless, and with a delightful way of overcoming difficulties. He might well have quarrelled when I was teaching him to read and giving his lesson in music, for I had not the patience of a schoolmaster. I was often unjust to him, but never once did he show signs of anger. It was understood that while I was down in the mine, Mattia and Capi were to go off into the suburbs and give musical and dramatic performances, and thereby increase of our fortune. Capi, to whom I explained this arrangement, appeared to understand and accordingly barked approval. The next day, following close in Uncle Gaspard's footsteps, I went down into the deep dark mine. He bade me be very cautious, but there was no need for his warning. It is not without a certain fear and anxiety that one leaves the light of day to enter into the bowels of the earth. When far down the gallery, I instinctively looked back, but the daylight at the end of the long black tube looked like a white globe, like the moon in the dark, starless sky. Soon the big black pit yawned before us. Down below I could see the swaying lamps of other miners as they descended the ladder. We reached the stall where Uncle Gaspard worked on the second level. All those employed in pushing the cars were young boys with the expectation of one who they called Professor. He was an old man who, in his younger days, had worked as a carpenter in the mine, but through an accident which had crushed his fingers, had been obligated to give up his trade. I was soon to learn what it meant to be a miner.